The air in the dimly lit study was thick with the scent of aged whiskey and cigar smoke, like the ghosts of 100 bad decisions still haunted the room. Heavy curtains muffled the city's night sounds, and the faint flicker from the chandelier cast long, tremulous shadows across the walls lined with old law books, dusty trophies, and secrets no one had dared open in years. Mr. Mike's fingers drummed impatiently against the mahogany desk tap, tap, tap. Each beat echoed like a countdown to something irreversible. His jaw was clenched so tightly that the veins in his neck bulged. He was sweating, but not from the heat. No, this was the kind of sweat that came with shame. With desperation. The kind of sweat that clung to a man who had no more cards left to play. Across from him, Geoffrey lounged in a high-backed leather chair as though he owned the place. He didn't, but he might as well. His presence filled the room, suffocating in its confidence. His designer suit molded to his lean frame like armor, his shoes gleamed with a shine too perfect for anyone working an honest living, and his lips held a smirk that wasn't born of amusement, but strategy. "She's blind," Mr. Mike finally said, the words cracking through the silence like a whip. His voice was rough, ragged, even as if dragged through gravel before being spoken. Geoffrey raised a brow. "And?" Mike's throat tightened. "And I need this money." Geoffrey swirled the amber liquid in his crystal tumbler with the lazy elegance of someone who enjoyed watching people unravel. Light fractured through the whiskey, dancing across the glass like fire licking at the edges of decency. "So," Geoffrey drawled, not even trying to hide his amusement, "you're willing to sell your niece to me for 20 million? His smile deepened, slow and wicked, revealing teeth that were too perfect, too white. They looked like they belonged in a predator's mouth. Mike flinched at the word "sell," but he didn't correct it. He couldn't. That's exactly what he was doing. "Yes," he said. The word tasted like rusted metal on his tongue. "I've tried everything for her. My brother died years ago, left her in my care. I paid for doctors, tutors. I gave up my life. Now it's time she repaid me." "Repaid you?" Geoffrey echoed, voice velvety and cold. "You speak as if she asked to be orphaned. Or blind." Mike didn't respond. His eyes, bloodshot and rimmed with guilt, fell to the desk. He gripped the edge until his knuckles turned white. Geoffrey leaned forward, setting his glass down with a soft clink. "Fine. We have a deal." Mike exhaled slowly, almost in disbelief that it was done. The weight of it landed on his shoulders like a shroud. But then he hesitated, voice dropping into something conspiratorial. "One more thing, Jeff. You have to marry her. Or at least make it look real. She's still family, people will talk." Geoffrey didn't even blink. "Deal." Mike wasn't sure what he expected, perhaps a flicker of hesitation, a sneer of disgust, or even laughter, but Geoffrey's acceptance was instant. Too easy. Too smooth. He leaned back again, swirling the whiskey once more before downing it in a single, clean motion. "Send me the papers. Prenup, transfer of guardianship, whatever legal gymnastics you've cooked up. I'll sign. You'll live with her for a while," Mike added quickly, voice still hushed, eyes darting toward the shadows in the corner as if the walls could hear. "She's not dumb. She'll suspect something if it's just an overnight thing." "Fine." Geoffrey stood, brushing invisible lint from his sleeve, then straightened his cufflinks. "This better be worth it." Mike didn't answer. He watched as Geoffrey walked toward the door, every step loud on the hardwood floor. Just before Geoffrey left, he paused, one hand on the brass doorknob. "What's her name?" Mike blinked. He hadn't expected that question. "Maria." Geoffrey nodded once, almost thoughtfully. "Pretty name. Hope she's as compliant as she sounds." And with that, he was gone. Mike sat alone, the silence crashing back around him. The chandelier flickered again, casting light on the documents he'd hidden beneath his desk drawer: guardianship forms, property deeds, and one final sheet with a single line. The cost of betrayal is always paid in innocence. Maria had lived in that house for most of her life, though it had never truly felt like home. The walls were too quiet, the furniture too cold, and Uncle Mike's footsteps always too close. She lost her sight at 7. A car accident. Her father had died instantly. Her mother passed 2 weeks later from complications. Maria didn't remember the crash, only the screams afterward. And then the blackness that never left. She adjusted quickly, or so she told people. She learned to read Braille, count steps, recognize people by their scent, their cadence, the tone of their voice. But what she could never adjust to was the loneliness. The kind of loneliness that doesn't come from being alone but from being unseen. And now, at 24, Maria's life had fallen into a rhythm of gentle silence. She painted with her fingers, listened to symphonies with closed eyes, and imagined colors she couldn't name. She didn't know that tonight, her world was about to change. The knock at the door was sharp. 3 times. Firm and unapologetic. Maria paused in the kitchen, fingers brushing the edges of the countertop as she moved cautiously toward the front of the house. "Uncle Mike," she called, frowning. He didn't answer. "Maria," he barked suddenly from the hallway, his tone unusually stiff. "Go to your room. I'll handle this." But she didn't move. Something in his voice made her freeze. Not fear. Not yet. But, something. A moment later, another voice followed this one, low, calm, confident. "I'd like to meet her now." Maria's breath caught. That wasn't someone from around here. That voice didn't belong in her world. The air shifted as footsteps approached, and suddenly there was a presence in front of her. Not Mike. This one smelled of cedarwood and cologne. Expensive cologne. "You must be Maria," the stranger said softly. Her head tilted. "And you are?" There was a pause. "Jeffrey. Are you Uncle Mike's friend?" Another pause. "Something like that." Maria was given 3 days to adjust before the engagement was announced. She heard whispers, felt them ripple through the house like poison in the air. Her uncle's tone was clipped when he spoke to her, his words too rehearsed. The smell of cigar smoke had grown stronger, and with it, the sense of doom. "You're getting married, Maria," he told her bluntly one evening. She laughed at first. "You're joking." "I'm not." "To who?" "Jeffrey." She flinched. "I don't even know him." "You will." She pressed a hand against her chest. "I don't want this." Mike's voice turned cold. "You don't get a say. He's wealthy, powerful. He can take care of you better than I ever could." Maria's heart broke then. Not because she was being forced to marry a stranger, but because her uncle had never really loved her. She realized it in that moment. All the nights she cried, all the birthdays forgotten, all the silences she endured, it all made sense. She was never family. She was a debt waiting to be paid off. Maria sat at the old piano in the garden, her spine straight, fingers hovering just above the chipped ivory keys. The instrument was out of tune, weather-worn by years of wind and neglect, but to her, it was perfect. It was the only place that ever truly felt like hers. The melody she played was a lullaby, soft and haunting, a thread tying her to a past she could barely remember. Her mother's voice echoed faintly in her mind, humming that very tune while brushing her hair, tucking her in, pressing kisses to her forehead with hands that smelled of rosewater and warm bread. Before the fire. Before everything turned to ash. Her hands trembled slightly as she played, the notes delicate, like pressed flowers on paper, fading but not yet forgotten. The garden around her was alive in a way she could only feel. The scent of jasmine hung heavy in the air, mixing with the recent memory of rain on soil. She reached her left hand out between verses, letting her fingertips brush the velvet petals of a blooming bush nearby, tracing the intricate shape of a flower she had never seen but knew intimately by touch. She leaned her head against the rough bark of the oak tree behind her, her breath steadying. She didn't need sight to know it was twilight. She could feel it in the cooling air, hear it in the soft rustle of leaves and the quieting of birds. She had been blind since the fire. That single night had reduced her world to ashes and shadows. What remained sound, scent, sensation was all she had. It had taken years to find comfort in it. Even now, she sometimes dreamed in color, only to wake in darkness. Uncle Mike had taken her in, yes, but not out of love. Not even duty. His was a house of obligation, of tolerance without warmth. His wife, Mrs. Ruth, had made her feelings known from the very start. Why bring that burden here, she had hissed the day Maria arrived, thinking the child couldn't hear her through the thin walls. But Maria heard everything. Every slight, every whisper, every sigh of annoyance when she knocked something over or asked for help. And Matthew, her cousin, had been worse. Cruel and the careless, cutting way only teenage boys could be. He hit her cane, rearranged the furniture, left toys in her path just to hear her stumble. He laughed when she cried. To them, she was an inconvenience. A ghost haunting their hallways. A girl-shaped shadow that bumped into things and disrupted their lives. But the piano. That was hers. A gift, if it could be called that, for her 16th birthday. Not wrapped. Not celebrated. Simply moved to the back garden with a muttered, "At least she'll stay out of the house." But Maria had claimed it. She would sit for hours, fingers mapping melodies only she could feel. The piano was her voice when words failed, her escape when the world pressed too close. Here, in the embrace of sound and solitude, she could almost pretend she was whole. But that evening, as dusk deepened and shadows stretched across the garden, Maria paused mid-chord. Voices. She stilled, hands hovering over the keys. Through the ivy-draped trellis, the muffled sound of her uncle's voice floated through the air. "We're rich," he whispered, voice trembling with excitement. 20 million. I sold Maria to Jeffrey. Maria's body locked. The words didn't make sense. Not at first. Her mind struggled to place them. To believe them. 20 million, Mrs. Ruth repeated, her voice sharp with disbelief. But she's blind. What could he possibly want with her? I don't care, Mike chuckled, and the sound of it turned Maria's stomach. We're set for life. The wind shifted. The jasmine scent faded beneath something colder. Sharper. Maria's breath caught. Her fingers slipped from the keys. She was being sold. Not offered. Not protected. Sold. Like livestock. Like nothing. She stood slowly, one hand braced on the piano's edge, her balance uncertain as a wave of nausea rolled over her. A dull ringing filled her ears. Or maybe it was the piano vibrating from the unfinished note. She couldn't tell. She turned toward the sound of the house, steps slow, measured. Each footfall on the stone path echoed with a new truth. She didn't belong to herself anymore. The wedding was a spectacle. Maria heard it more than she experienced it, waves of sound crashing against her senses. Laughter that rang too loud, champagne flutes clinking in mechanical toasts, cameras flashing like tiny bolts of lightning she couldn't see but could feel in the tightening of her shoulders. The ceremony took place on the deck of a cruise ship, gliding across still water. Strings played a hauntingly upbeat melody, their tune foreign to Maria's ears. People whispered behind lace fans and polished shoes. They looked at her with curiosity, some with pity, others with confusion. She stood beside Jeffrey, the man who had bought her. His hand was wrapped around hers, firm and steady. A show of affection, or ownership? She couldn't tell. The silk gown she wore rustled softly with every breeze, the veil pinned into her dark curls like a net trying to catch something that had already been lost. She didn't know what color it was. No one told her. "Do you, Maria?" the officiant began, and the rest blurred. Maria didn't speak. She simply nodded when nudged, her lips trembling around the single word she was expected to say, yes. And with that, she was his. That night, the house was too big. Jeffrey's mansion was all glass and marble, cold surfaces and high ceilings that swallowed sound. Maria stood barefoot on polished floors, her cane tapping lightly ahead of her as she moved. He'd given her a room. Large. Luxurious. Filled with soft rugs and imported sheets. But it wasn't hers. Nothing was. She found the bathroom by touch. Marble counters. Cold tile. A mirror she couldn't see. She stood there for a long moment, her hands trailing the edge of the sink. The designer dress Jeffrey had sent earlier now lay in a puddle at her feet, expensive silk that had never felt more like chains. She stepped under the shower. Scalding water hit her skin, a shock that made her gasp. But she didn't turn it down. She needed the pain. Needed to feel something, anything, that wasn't confusion or betrayal or fear. She pressed her forehead to the tile, her fingers curling against the wall. Married. To a stranger. To a man who'd bought her. What did he want? Why her? Why blind, broken Maria? She hadn't even cried. Not yet. Not then. Meanwhile. Jeffrey stood in the hallway, silent. The door was ajar, just enough for him to hear the soft sound of water and the occasional, stifled breath. He hadn't meant to watch. He hadn't meant to feel anything. But he did. Maria was not what he expected. He thought she'd be meek. Pitiful. A helpless little thing easily shaped to fit the role he needed. But even blind, she carried herself with a strange kind of dignity. Even in silence, she spoke volumes. He remembered the way her fingers danced on the piano, the way her face tilted toward the sky like she could still feel color in the sunlight. And suddenly, for the first time in years, Jeffrey felt the uncomfortable prick of doubt. He had made many deals in his life. Bought companies, bought people, brokered power with blood and words and charm. But this? This felt different. He turned away from the door. His pulse was unsteady. His jaw tight. He hadn't just bought a bride. He had entered a storm. Maria emerged from the bathroom wrapped in a towel, her damp hair clinging to her back. The floor was cold beneath her feet. The silence of the mansion pressed in like a weight. No laughter. No voices. Just the soft hum of distant appliances and the sound of her own heartbeat. She moved slowly down the hall, her cane in hand, trailing gently along the wall. The house felt less like a home and more like a museum, cold, lifeless, curated for appearances. She opened the door to the guest room she'd been given and stepped inside, not expecting to find anyone. But he was there. Jeffrey. Sitting in a chair near the window, a glass of something amber in his hand. Sorry, she said softly, surprised. You don't have to apologize, he replied, voice lower than before. Almost, gentle. She hesitated in the doorway. Why me? She asked. He didn't answer